You believe your home is your one true sanctuary, the only place where you can lock the door, shut out the world, and be completely yourself. But every quiet room has secrets, and sometimes you're not the only one listening to the silence. These stories are about what happens when the locks don't matter, and the watcher is already inside. My name is Mike, and this all happened maybe a week or two ago. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my roommate, Leo. I didn't know him before this. We found each other on a Facebook group for local housing. He seemed totally normal when we met to see the apartment. He was quiet, polite, maybe a little awkward, but not in a creepy way. At the time, I thought that was a good thing. I wasn't looking to make a new best friend. Just needed someone who'd pay their share of the rent and not destroy the place. For the first couple of months, everything was fine. We have opposite schedules. I work a standard 9 to 5, and he does the late shift at some distribution center. Because of that, I hardly ever saw him. Most mornings when I was heading out, his bedroom door would be closed. When I'd get home at night, he was already gone. We'd maybe see each other once or twice a week. Just a quick hey in the kitchen. It wasn't anything special, but it worked. Then I started noticing little things in my room that were just a little off. The first time I came home from work and saw my closet door was slightly ajar. I always keep it shut. I just can't stand seeing the mess of my clothes hanging there. But I just figured I must have forgotten to close it that morning. A few days after that, I noticed my desk chair was turned just slightly, facing my bed. I never leave it like that. Again, I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being forgetful. Still, it left this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, this sense that someone had been in my space. One Saturday morning, I was doing a deep clean, wiping down shelves, dusting, and then I started on the windowsill. That's when I saw it. Tucked behind my dresser, plugged into the wall outlet, was this little black USB charger cube. I didn't recognize it. I unplugged it to get a better look, and when I turned it over, I froze. There was a tiny, perfectly round lens on the front. It was a camera, a small wireless camera, pointed directly at my bed. My hand was shaking as I held it. It didn't even have an SD card in it, which meant it was likely streaming. I just stood there in the middle of my room, feeling sick. I thought about all the nights I'd slept in here, changed my clothes, all of it. The only person who could have put it there was Leo. He's the only other person with a key. He wasn't home right then. His door was shut, and the apartment was dead quiet. I stood in the hallway just staring at his door, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself not to, but I couldn't stop myself. I slowly turned the knob and pushed the door open. His room smelled stale, like old food and unwashed clothes. The blinds were drawn, so it was dark even though it was the middle of the day. His bed was a mess of tangled sheets, and his desk was covered in junk. I looked around for a minute, half expecting to find a laptop with recordings on it, but there was nothing that stood out, just a messy room. I closed his door and went back to my own room, but I couldn't shake that awful feeling. I decided to set a trap. I put the camera in my nightstand drawer, buried under a bunch of old charging cables. My plan was simple. If he came looking for it, I'd know for sure it was him. For 2 nights, nothing happened. I was still on edge, but with no new signs. I started to wonder if I was just being paranoid. Then came the 3rd night. I woke up around 3 a.m. I wasn't sure what woke me at first, but then I heard it, a soft scraping sound. I realized it was coming from right next to me, from my nightstand drawer. I cracked my eyes open just a little, pretending I was still asleep. In the faint glow from the streetlights outside, I saw a figure. It was Leo. He was in my room, hunched over my nightstand, slowly pulling the drawer open. He was looking for the camera. My chest felt like it was going to explode. My heart was beating so loud I was sure he could hear it. I stayed completely still, terrified. not knowing what to do. And then he stopped. He froze, standing there in the dark. Slowly, he turned his head towards my bed. He was looking right at me. For a second, I thought maybe he couldn't tell I was awake. But then he whispered, "I know you're up." Ice shot through my veins. He asked me what I did with it. My fear instantly turned to rage. I sat bolt upright and demanded to know why he put a camera in my room. He just stared at me with this blank look and said he thought I was stealing money from him. I told him that was insane, that it didn't make any sense. I said the camera was aimed at my bed, that he was a sicko. He tried to argue, saying he just wanted proof, but I didn't believe a word of it. I told him he was a liar and that he'd been spying on me. We started yelling. He kept saying I was overreacting. I told him I was calling the landlord, calling the cops. My voice was shaking. Finally, I ripped open the drawer, grabbed the camera, and held it up to his face. "This is your proof," I said. "You're never getting it back." I stormed out of the room, went to the kitchen, and threw the camera on the floor, smashing it with my shoe until the plastic cracked. I told him to stay the hell out of my room and that I was reporting him in the morning. Leo just stood in the hallway, his hands clenched into fists, staring at me with that same empty expression. Then he turned around and went back into his room without saying another word. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just sat on the couch, too scared to go back to my room. Every little creak in the apartment made me jump. When the sun came up, I went to check the kitchen floor. The broken pieces of the camera were gone. That was a week ago. I told my landlord everything. He said he'd look into it, but nothing's happened. Leo is still here. We don't talk, but the way he looks at me when we pass in the hall, it makes my skin crawl. It's like he's just waiting. I don't know why he really put the camera there. The stealing excuse was such an obvious lie. I don't know what he recorded or what he was planning on doing with it, and I don't want to know. But every night when I lie down, I can't shake the feeling that there's another one hidden somewhere. I've searched my room from top to bottom and found nothing, but the thought is always there. I was 24 when this happened. I'd just finished college and was kind of in between jobs, doing odd gigs around my town for cash. Babysitting, house cleaning, whatever I could find. A woman I'd dog-sat for before recommended me to a friend of a neighbor, a guy named Greg. He called me one afternoon, explained he was traveling for about a week, and needed someone to stay at his house and look after his German shepherd, Buddy. He said Buddy had some separation anxiety and did better if someone was actually staying over instead of just stopping by. The pay he offered was pretty good, so I agreed. I met Greg a couple of days later. He was in his early 50s, tall, with wire-rimmed glasses and a fleece jacket. Nothing about him seemed off at first. Maybe a bit overly friendly, but not in a creepy way. His house was on the outskirts of town, set back in a wooded area. The place itself was nice, but felt a little stuck in time. With tan linoleum floors and faded floral curtains, Greg showed me the ropes about how often to let Buddy out, where the spare key was, what food was fair game. He said I could use the spare bedroom, which was on the first floor right off the living room. I started that Tuesday. The first 2 nights were completely normal. I watched TV, took Buddy for his evening walks, and then crashed in the spare room with him sleeping on the floor next to the bed. It was the 3rd night when things got weird. I was sitting on the bed, just scrolling on my phone, when I noticed something odd. On the dresser across from me, next to a lamp, was a little black digital clock. I remember thinking it looked out of place. It was new and sleek, black plastic with a bright red LED display, while everything else in the room looked like it was from the 90s. I don't know what made me look closer. Maybe it was a flicker of light on the plastic surface, but as I leaned in, I saw it, a tiny, perfect pinhole. right above the numbers. It was angled directly at the bed. My stomach just sank. You read stories about these hidden camera clocks, but I'd never seen one. My mind started racing. I picked it up. It felt a little heavier than it should have, and I could hear a faint, high-pitched hum inside. I turned it over in my hands, staring into that tiny lens. That's when Buddy, who had been quiet by the door, lifted his head and let out a low whine. And from somewhere else in the house, not the front door, but deeper inside, I heard the soft click of a door closing. Every hair on my arms stood up. Greg wasn't supposed to be back until the following Monday. It was only Thursday night. I froze, still holding the clock, my heart pounding so hard. I thought I was going to be sick. Then I heard slow, quiet footsteps on the hallway carpet. I quickly put the clock back down, ran to the bedroom door, and turned the lock just as the footsteps stopped right outside. Then Greg's voice came through the door, calm, a little out of breath. He said he'd forgotten something and needed me to open up. I couldn't say anything. A second later, he said it wasn't what it looked like, that the clock was just a motion sensor for the dog, and he hadn't wanted to tell me about it because he thought it would freak me out. I backed away from the door, my hand clamped over my mouth. He told me to come out so we could talk about it like adults. But when I didn't answer, his tone changed. The knocking turned into pounding. He yelled at me to open the door, his voice sharp and angry now. Buddy started barking, which only seemed to make him more agitated. I glanced at the window. It was low enough to the ground. I fumbled with the latch, my hands shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get it open. Behind me, Greg was still hammering on the door, shouting that if I didn't open up, he'd use his key and call the police, tell them I was a burglar. I didn't wait to hear any more. I pushed the window open, scrambled out onto the grass, and just ran. Buddy whined from the window but didn't follow. I sprinted down the driveway until I hit the main road. My phone was in my pocket, and I called my dad, who lived about 20 minutes away, and just told him to come get me right now. By the time he pulled up, I was hiding behind a tree. Greg's house was dark and silent. I stayed at my dad's that night. The next morning, I blocked Greg's number. I talked to a lawyer, but he said that without the device itself or a recording, it would be almost impossible to press charges. It would just be my word against his. I thought about going back to get a picture, but the lawyer strongly advised against it, and the idea of seeing Greg again made my skin crawl. So, nothing ever happened to him. I never got paid for those nights. The woman who recommended me to him never answered my texts again. For months after, I had nightmares about it, waking up and seeing that little black lens staring at me. I started checking every single clock, every smoke detector, even picture frames, and I still think about that moment, hearing that door click shut in a house I thought was empty. It meant he was there the whole time, watching. I booked the Varbo rental in early October, about a week before my girlfriend Sarah and I were supposed to go visit her sister. It was in a small rural town a few hours from us. I picked it because it was affordable, had decent reviews, and looked cozy in the pictures. An old 2-story house with a big porch and hardwood floors. It had this kind of rustic, storybook feel. There was one small note in the description that I barely registered at the time. A line saying the attic was off limits for storage. I'd stayed in rentals before where owners locked up certain areas for their personal stuff, so I didn't think twice about it. When we pulled into the driveway that first evening, just as the sun was setting, the house looked a little more run down than in the photos, and there was something about how it stood all by itself, with only one other house visible way down the road, surrounded by a dark line of trees. It just felt isolated. The host, David, was waiting for us on the porch. He was maybe in his early 60s, tall but with a slight hunch, and thin gray hair combed perfectly. He was wearing a neatly pressed flannel shirt. He smiled when we got out of the car, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, a little too practiced. His gaze lingered on us just a bit too long as we shook hands. His voice was friendly, but there was a weird firmness to it when he started the tour. He led us inside. The house smelled faintly of dust and something vaguely sweet, like old potpourri. He showed us around. The living room, the kitchen. Upstairs, there was a single bedroom with a large bed. When we came back downstairs, David stopped at a door in the hallway and tapped the heavy padlock on it. He told us in a much more serious tone that this door stays locked. It was his personal storage, he said, and there was no reason for us to go in there. He didn't smile this time. He just pointed out where the extra towels were before wishing us a good stay and leaving. After he left, Sarah and I unpacked and sat out on the porch for a while. The quiet out there was almost unsettling. No traffic, no neighbors, just the sound of crickets. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a faint, dull thud from somewhere in the house. I listened, but nothing else happened, so I figured it was just the old house settling and went back to sleep. The next morning, we went into town and met up with Sarah's sister for lunch. We stayed out until after dark. Around 2 a.m., I woke up needing to use the bathroom. As I was walking back to the bedroom, I froze halfway up the stairs. I heard a scraping sound coming from upstairs near the attic door. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the floor. It lasted for a few seconds, stopped, and then started again. My first thought was maybe David had come back for something, but he'd specifically said he wouldn't be around. I stood there listening until it stopped, then quietly went into the bedroom and whispered to Sarah, asking if she was awake. She was. She'd heard it too. We stayed up for another hour, but the sound never came back. The second night was worse. We'd been out all day and were exhausted, but around 3 a.m. the noises started again. Not scraping this time, but footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth in the attic right above our heads. 4 or 5 steps, a pause, then a few more. Each pause lasted just long enough to make you think whoever it was listening. Sarah whispered that she thought she could hear breathing between the steps. My heart was pounding out of my chest. We just laid there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. By the third day, the whole house felt wrong. We went out, but coming back felt like walking into a heavy, oppressive cloud. That night, the noises started earlier, around midnight. First, a faint metallic sound, like keys jingling. Then the footsteps, on and off, for almost an hour. The fourth night was our last. As we were getting ready for bed, Sarah stopped brushing her hair and asked me if the carbon monoxide detector on the ceiling looked weird to me. At first, I didn't see anything, but when I stood on the bed to get a closer look, I saw a tiny, shiny black dot in the center of the white plastic. A cold dread washed over me. I got a chair, unscrewed the detector from the ceiling, and popped it open. Inside was a small, battery-powered camera, its tiny green light blinking. Sarah just sat on the bed, pale and silent. I searched the rest of the room and found another one, a tiny lens poking through a nail hole in the wall near the dresser. Both of them pointed right at the bed. That was it. We threw our stuff into our bags, not even bothering to fold anything, and got out of there. We drove to a nearby gas station and called the police. 2 officers met us and we explained everything. The noises, the locked attic, the cameras. They followed us back to the house. The front door was unlocked. When we showed them the attic door, we were shocked to see the padlock was gone, and the door was slightly ajar. It was pitch black up there. The officers went up the stairs to investigate. A few moments later, we heard shouting. There was a commotion, and it quickly became clear what was happening. They called us up. David was there. He had been hiding in a small closet, where he had a small monitor set up. getting a live feed from the cameras. He was arrested immediately for invasion of privacy and trespassing. I think the rental company gave us a voucher, probably hoping we wouldn't make a big deal about it online. We took it, but it didn't change what happened. That feeling of being watched, of not being safe even in a private space. It doesn't just go away. We stick to hotels now, and so these stories come to an end. But some questions linger. If you found undeniable proof you were being watched in your own home, what would be your very first move? Share your thoughts and theories. See you in the next one.